So the book that I picked to read was House Rules by Jodi Picoult. And this book depicts a story about Jacob Hunt, who is an 18-year-old boy with autism Asperger's syndrome. This book takes the perspectives of individuals that are in Jacob's life. So Jacob is considered to be a blistering intellectual mind that has capabilities of fixing microwaves and computers. He's considered to be meticulous and knowledgeable. However, his mother Emma describes his difficulties of wanting to make a connection but is locked in his own world. Um, she alludes to Jacob's sensitivity to touch, and when he's under a stressful situation, he uses the words of others. Um, he's also sensitive to color, to the color orange. He throws tantrums, tags in his clothes bother him. He has repetitive behaviors under high stress. Um, he likes sticking to his schedules and routine, and when they stray away from those routines, it must be properly planned in advance. Um, Emma's ex husband, Henry, left both Jacob and Theo, who's Jacob's younger brother, when Theo was a baby. And Emma describes Henry's incapability of dealing with Jacob's tantrums because he was a stay at home worker. Um, However, she also states in the book that Jacob's academic capabilities isn't mirroring her ex-husband's Henry's behavior as well. So then the book moves to Theo's perspective, and it seems that Theo is a little insensitive. He's narrow-minded and self-centered about the situation. He frequently makes references to unspoken house rules in a weird way that kind of guides his behavior. It can almost appear that he alludes to a different life other than the one that he has. In reading Theo's story, you learn that he has difficulties and missed out on a lot in having an older brother with autism Asperger's disorder. The very first sentence of Theo's story starts with what happened, an incident that happened where he ended up having to have like stitches from one of Jacob's tantrums. He also described an encounter with Jacob in a boat, but Theo often visits a family house that's nearby their home, and he kind of desires to have a normal life that he sees with these people. Um, so he also feels sorry that he does things to set Jacob off, which is he says is very easy. Like things have to be color coded. His clothing has to be color coded when they're put away. But then he realizes that his mother is the one who has to deal with that, and he says that she did not sign up for that. So um, he feels really bad about it. Theo feels as though a lot of the family resources are centered around Jacob. Um, and he also describes that he has been put on the back burner um, of the family and having to deal with things like he wanted to get his driver's license, but he couldn't do it because of things like Theo had a tantrum or had a bad day, and he had to do things like go to his Jacob's teachers and let them know that Jacob had a bad day before he goes to his classes. So Jacob has an explicit interest in forensic analysis to the kind of point of it's like an obsession. He reenacts crime scenes with his mother Emma. Then the story progresses to a series of events that makes Jacob appear to have committed a murder in their small town of Townsend, Vermont. When Jacob's tutor Jess Ogilvy is murdered, Jacob is accused of that murder, although Jacob displays numerous social and interaction deficits. It's viewed by the police as sort of like a cover up. So Jacob went to tutoring at one of the houses that his tutor Jess was house sitting, and he noticed that, or he kind of realizes that his brother was in the house and startled Jess while she was house sitting, and she hits her head on the sink and died. So Jacob did what was considered an unspoken house rule or a house rule in their household and staged the crime scene to look like it was Jess's boyfriend, Mark. I can't remember his last name, but it made it look like it was Mark's who did it, and Mark then tried to make it look like it was a kidnapping. So that's really the series of events. But I think in comparing these behaviors with the DSM 5 outlines specific criterions as it relates to autism and deficits in the use of social communication and social interaction in multiple contexts. Jacob displays um, social communication and interaction across multiple contexts. For instance, in Theo's story, he explained a situation where Jacob met a few of his friends and rambled on and on about forensic analysis. And the following day, when he went to go hang out with these friends, they basically blacklisted him. Jacob is also overwhelmed. He will not communicate or use words of others when he can't find the words to express his feelings. House rule also defines moment when Jacob had a complete meltdown in the grocery store when the attendant who hands out samples was not where she should have been. And his mom or his therapist did recommend a calming technique to singing Bob Marley songs that calmed him. So she calmed Jacob down by singing I Shot the Sheriff. And these behaviors directly affect Jacob's interactions with other individuals. Jacob does not display interest in peers when he has clearly established that he's not interested in what others think of him. He states in the book that Theo cares about what others, his peers, think of him. Additionally, Jacob's normal back and forth conversation can be considered abnormal, and Jacob can be expressionless at times. Jacob's mother, Emma, also described that at age 2, Jacob began to use words so that he can avoid eye contact or connection with people. And he does not have the appropriate developmental relationship past his mother. The only person that I can really think of in the story that Jacob kind of looks forward to seeing is the sample woman when they go grocery shopping. His restrictive and repetitive behavior, Jacob Mother identifies him as referring back to repetitive behavior such as excessive blinking under high stress and under a stressful situation. Jacob sticks to a strict routine, and if something out of the norm, like going to the dentist or going on vacation, it must be planned and prepared for well in advance. His tantrums are meltdown to the simplest change in routine, and his clothes must be color coordinated. Jacob was initially fascinated with dinosaurs, but currently he is extremely obsessed with forensic analysis. Jacob's sensory sensitivity is to bright lights, sounds of trucks, textures of cereal, tags, touch, and colors. In contrast to that, Jacob impresses individuals with his knowledge and ability to adequately articulate his observation and thoughts. Although he may have numerous social communication deficits, there is a blunt humor that can be extremely funny or entirely infuriating. It is clear that Jacob cares about his mother and brother. He will engage in conversation. However, if you turn your back or you become distracted for the slightest second, Jacob's gone. He won't start a conversation and he won't finish it if you're not interested. Jacob is able to share imaginative play. In the first scene of the book, Jacob and his mother is acting out a crime scene orchestrated by Jacob. And Jacob's repetitive behavior are not something that occurs all the time. It only occurs or resurfaces during stressful situations. Like he doesn't like to be called a freak. Sometimes he'll crouch in the corner and rock back and forth depending on, how stressful the situation is, or he'll blink excessively. Um, Although Jacob has sensory input, he attempts to manage the behavior by doing the things like holding his breath or soothing himself to "I shot the sheriff." So he's very well aware. My reflection of this book is Jacob is highly intelligent and fully aware of his disorder. In the book, Jacob's mother described autism Asperger as a label that gets Jacob the assistance that he needs and not a description of who he is, which is something that everybody should be aware of because someone has a disorder that does not define them. Um, Based on the book, in my opinion, Jacob's severity level of social communication and interaction is at a level 2, which requires substantial support. And the restrictive, repetitive behavior is at a level 1, which requires support. Understanding that Jacob's behavior and in response to the environmental stimuli, it is important to teach Jacob's substitutional or alternative behaviors. Emma also noticed that with behavioral and speech therapy, Jacob was able to speak again when he was younger. With certain programs, some behaviors may be removed from his repertoire, such as excessive blinking. A passage in the book that identified that Jacob could have had a job fixing streetlights. However, Emma referenced that cars and truck moving in the opposite direction and those loud noises would be a stressful situation for Jacob. My opinion on that is that I've learned that limiting people with disorders or those who don't function based on the norm is a mistake. I think that it is important to test Jacob's limit and see what he's capable of and see what would, have him to have a complete meltdown. Forcing him outside of his comfort zone and at least trying to make him a functional adult. I'll also explore the option of medication for his focus or his sensitivity. Would be something to look into with Jacob. I can't recall in the book or if I ever got that far because I'll be honest with you all, I did not read this entire book. But I think it's important to at least know, being that he's so meticulous and intelligent, it would be beneficial to know what he can and can't do and if medication is an option for him, as well as testing for generalization, as well as testing to see, in a setting other than, teaching him these things. My overall perception of this book is bringing awareness to individuals with autism from different perspectives. So we always hear stories, at least I've always heard stories of people in the family household being so supportive, but you never really hear of the behind the scenes kind of situation where individuals are technically from a broken home or it's a single family home or, families really don't want to be bothered with having to deal with a child with autism. And that's basically what we got a real purview of this book. I intend on finishing this book because the chapters that I have read were absolutely captivating. It gave me a real insight to the devotion. It made me question things like what is really going on in Jacob's mind. I mean, you get a perspective because he does have chapters where it's kind of written in his tongue and hard to follow at points, but it lets you kind of make the connection where it is like, if I was in a predicament like that, would I feel resentment? Would my family members resent me for basically driving my family away? Or, is this disorder really hindering everybody from accomplishing what they want in their lives? Which you can kind of see that from Theo's perspective. But I think it's an overall book that teaches us about the awareness and the living with it, real life, like being involved, like the quality of life, the issues, the problems, the dynamics of a family structure. So I think this book was really important. And it also sheds light on, people out there not really knowing about it to say that I'm using autism as an excuse to get out of murder. So I really enjoyed this book and I hope you enjoyed my presentation. Thanks for watching.